The governments are killing Santa Claus, and this is why I'm not a doomer. I can't be a doomer. I can't lie down and let them kill him. I have to fight against it. I have to say something. This is not okay. Do you feel optimistic about your future? If you're part of Gen Z, I'm willing to bet that the answer is probably no. And why is that? Well, first of all, I'm part of Gen Z. I'm 25. Second of all, I've been speaking to multiple Gen Z people across multiple countries. Finland, Bulgaria, the US, the UK, Ireland. And I've come to the conclusion that the vast majority of us are not optimistic about our futures at all. If you look at the popularity of the doomer meme, I think this shows the kind of attitude that our generation has towards the future. It is this big attitude of nihilism and despair about an impending set of crises that everybody feels coming but nobody really wants to articulate. My goal in this video is not to feed into that sense of doom, rather to describe the things that are causing it for this generation. Again, I have to stress, the goal of the video is not to promote doom, but to show what causes it. I'm not a doomer myself, and I'm going to tell you why towards the end of this video. First, we need to put Gen Z doomers in the proper context. We need to start by defining what a doomer actually is. A doomer is somebody who has a very negative, fatalistic attitude about global problems in the future. And this attitude is reflected in their outlook towards the present. A Gen Z doomer might see something like the dating marketplace and tell you it's completely destroyed and there's no reason for them to go in and try and find a suitable partner, man or woman. They will tell you that they've completely given up on the dating game as a result. You could see a similar attitude when it comes to the workplace also. They will tell you maybe that they were working for a period of years, but that it was impossible to save up any money because inflation kept rising higher and higher year on year. So they just gave up. They decided to take social benefits and more or less enjoy their time as best as possible while society crumbles around them. Again, I'm just describing what's going on. I'm not saying I personally hold these beliefs, although I do think that a lot of the doomer outlooks and predictions for the future, while quite gloomy, are particularly accurate. So I'm not going to make a straw man out of the position either. Now, let's put Gen Z in their historical context. This is important too. You have to remember when a lot of us were born in the late 90s and early 2000s, there was a sense of general optimism worldwide. The Cold War had ended, and there was a sense that is best encapsulated in Francis Fukuyama's 1992 book, The Last Man and the End of History, that liberal democracy had won. It was the end point of man's ideological evolution. In hindsight, this might seem like a very naive idea, but it was quite prevalent at the time. Now, that's quite an abstract way of going about things, but I remember when I was growing up, and maybe you do too, that there was a sense of the fact that this optimism would continue, that multiple countries would continue to get more and more prosperous and more free, and that when we grew up, our generation would be at the forefront of this. This is really important, because now, as people like me and people like you have entered the workplace, we realize that this very optimistic vision of the future that we were given as young people has vanished. We've entered a workforce and we are objectively, economically worse off than the generation before us, which I'll come to in a moment, by the way. So there is a general sense, I think, in Gen Z of betrayal. We were promised a certain future, and that future did not arrive, and I think that very much feeds into the doomer position. Now, I think there are three causes behind the doomer position, and I'm going to outline them right now. Okay, so the first main cause behind the doomer mindset in Gen Z is economic. Now, I know that sounds really boring, okay? But I'm going to make this as entertaining for you as possible. And I'm going to start with a personal example. I'm 25. I'm quite old for a Zoomer. But when my dad was my age, he worked exactly the same job as I do now. He was married, he had one child, me. He had just put down a mortgage to get a house in the town that he lived in, and he had a car. Compare that to me at the same age. I am not in a relationship because I realize, that these things can be expensive. I could be in one if I wanted to, obviously, but economically it would be difficult, I can't lie. And I am paying just over half of my monthly salary to rent a small annex on the side of my landlady's house. Not only do I not even have the option to mortgage a place, but I can barely rent my own building, my own living space. And I know a lot of Gen Z people also live with roommates and things like this. Now, again, I work in the same job as my dad, and there's an extra point here that I am more qualified now than he was back then, right? So I should be qualified for working higher positions with more pay, but again, due to the competitiveness of degrees and whatnot, these opportunities are not available to me. Why do I bring all of this up? I think this is a really good example for a lot of you out there that shows that our purchasing power as a generation is objectively worse than our parents. And this is true across multiple countries. I know people in the US who suffer with this, in the UK, and again across Europe. So, we as a generation have a reduced purchasing power, which limits our ability to live a life comparative to the one that our parents lived and the ones that we saw them living. There's an extra problem with this in that a lot of us know intuitively that our governments put out statistics that show that they are rich countries. Now, Ireland is pretty bad for this. I could go into a lot of detail, but that would be very boring. Ireland's GDP statistics, for example, are not accurate. They're based on the output of multinational corporations who generate revenue in Ireland and then take that revenue back to the USA, but it's recorded here. So Ireland is a rich country in name only. We're technically a first world country. But most people here will tell you that they ain't feeling the benefits of being a rich country. We feel poor, but we call ourselves rich. And this is important because it creates a really big psychological problem for a lot of people like me who are striving, who want to make a better life for ourselves. And we say, well, I'm in a rich country, I should be doing a lot better. But I'm not. I'm actually struggling. Now, this is not going to end well for a lot of people. A lot of people are not going to be resilient enough to cope with that. The next thing I think that's causing a lot of our generation to feel a sense of doom is the amount of debt we actually have to get into if we want to leave our parents' homes. Most of us will need to take out multiple loans in order to flee the nest. That could be for getting a car to transport ourselves around the place, university if that applies, and maybe you're in the US. And if we want to get housing, then obviously a mortgage or rent will apply, and the rent is obviously inflating year on year. It's a massive problem here in Ireland, and I assume in a lot of the viewers' countries as well. This is making it harder and harder for Gen Z to become independent from their parents, right? So this is whether you go to university or not. I know electricians, who I mentioned in my last video, subtle plug, who are slightly younger than me, who are making more money than me, who cannot leave their parents' homes because the price of doing so is just too big. And what does this mean? Well, it means that young people are not, let's say, meeting each other and having a good time, men and women. And in the long run, this is going to reduce our ability to have kids and to build up the next generation of our countries. And this, I think, adds to the sense of decline across multiple countries. We all know that the birth rates are collapsing, and our predicament is not helping this. So then in Gen Z, there are people like me, people who see that the economic situation isn't so good if you want to leave your home, but do it anyway because you really, really want that independence, right? I'm living here, I'm living like a Spartan economically, and I'm doing it because I want that sense of independence from my parents. I don't want to be a burden on them. And people like us, well, we go out, we live, but then we have absolutely no money to spend on discretionary items, maybe like one holiday per year, which is something our parents' generation had, by the way, so it's not that much to ask. A Gen Z woman I work with who's slightly younger than me, she recently told an older colleague of mine who found €2 on the ground to put that money towards her savings. Not buy something nice, not treat yourself, put it towards your savings. And I think that really shows the mindset of our generation when it comes to money. There is that fear that some kind of small emergency, maybe a car accident or a fire or something like this, or an injury, could land you in a lot of debt very, very quickly. And this is an anxiety that we hold on our shoulders. And I think a lot of the doomers in this generation certainly do that. The second issue that I see causing a lot of doomerism in our generation is demographic. And this is definitely something that is more subconscious than something we actually realize and feel in our day-to-day lives. We understand that there are a lot more boomers than zoomers, to use this kind of childish language. And these boomers are going to retire. We know they're going to retire. And retired people need taxes. They need other people to be paying taxes for them to afford to be able to retire. We implicitly understand as Zoomers that we are going to be the ones who get taxed to pay for these people's retirements. Now, because of the economic situation that we're in, that I described in the previous section, we are being very much delayed in terms of being able to have more children who would eventually grow up to become taxpayers. And there is a sense in our generation that because we can't have offspring who are going to pay for us, and there isn't enough of us to pay for the generations ahead of us, that we are never ever going to be able to retire by working a standard 9 to 5. This is something that a lot of people fear in our generation. Now, the demographic issue also spills over into the dating market. There is a sense that the dating market is completely broken, that dating apps and internationalization make it impossible for young men and young women to actually meet each other and find common ground. Now, personally, I think this is actually caused by Gen Z men not being able to develop themselves economically to attract women. And then Gen Z women are dealing with a multitude of psychological issues that make it very difficult for them to form relationships with the opposite sex. And I think both of these issues combined are preventing the sexes from really speaking to each other. And then that, coupled with the economic issues I described, well, you've got a cocktail for disaster. The sexes are not speaking to each other, and that's going to feed further into the demographic problem. Then, because there are more older generations than Zoomers, the older generations, we know they're going to vote in their self-interest, and they're not wrong for doing it. You vote in your self-interest too. The problem is, there isn't enough of us as a voting bloc in most of our countries to offset the boomer vote, the Gen X vote. The issue with that is, we can see all of the political problems around us, but yet we feel there's nothing we can do about it. We don't feel that we have any agency. And of course, the political parties aren't going to change to accommodate us because we don't have enough vote share to actually matter to them. In summary, older generations can't afford to retire because there isn't enough Zoomers, and the Zoomers really, at the moment, cannot afford to actually live their lives. This situation is completely untenable. Everybody can kind of feel it, but nobody can articulate it, as I have done here. I think this is something that definitely is feeding into the doomerism of this generation. Okay, so I know the previous 2 points might have been quite heavy. You might actually be feeling quite a personal sense of doom right now. Believe me, that was not my intention with this video. Again, I'm just outlining the causes. I am not a doomer myself. I'm going to come to that. I think the third thing, and the main thing that's feeding into this sense of doom in this generation, is psychological. And I was speaking with a friend of mine from Finland recently who actually remarked to me that he thinks the psychological crisis has already begun. And I'm inclined to agree with him for the following reason. We see in our society at large right now, a lot of scapegoating, a lot of people who are trying to put their best foot forward in life, but feel like they can't because of some kind of external circumstance holding them back. Now, again, I think these external circumstances are really economic and or political, but people get this feeling, they don't look rationally for the solutions, and that's a human thing to do. I'm not castigating anybody for doing this. But some examples of the scapegoating in our generation, I found them in the comment section of my last video. Now, I'm very grateful for a lot of these comments. There were some really constructive ones, and I'm really thankful for you for actually sharing a lot of your stories in my comment section. That said, there was a lot of scapegoating going on. A lot of Gen Z people were blaming a lot of boomers for their problems, which may not be unjustified. A lot of boomers were saying that Gen Z are a lazy generation, and if they just worked hard and pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, then they would be completely fine. And again, I think a sense of personal responsibility is very, very important. I'm not trying to fence it here. I'm saying both points of view do hold weight. But then the key point is here, these people are not feeling good psychologically, and they're looking for a scapegoat to pin the modern problems on, and that's not good enough. You can see this, it's not only a generational thing, it's also a sex difference thing, right? So you will see really extremist guys like incels, they will pin all their problems on women, and then you have the other extreme where feminists, like extreme feminists, will pin all of their modern problems on men. The same could be done in terms of race as well, for example. So we've got this like trend of scapegoating going on. Everybody knows that there's massive problems that kind of are holding them back. They don't really want to delve into this. They're going at it from an emotional kind of angry lens, and they're looking to pin their problems on someone else. It doesn't matter who that group is, but they are looking to do it. Another thing that feeds into this is the isolation that social media is causing our generation. Now, I know that's a very, very cliche point to go into, but I do have some data to back this up. Now, I have a quite small following on X.com. I'm not asking you to follow me there because I don't really use the platform anymore. But I built up quite a following of Gen Z people, and I asked them a very simple question. How many friends have you met in real life in the past week? Now, my poll did not get a lot of respondents, but it feeds into the kind of idea I had based on my conversations with friends before launching that poll. The results of the poll were as follows. 50% of the respondents, now again, there were not that many, said they had met 0 people. 0 friends in the past week. And that's not right. That's not right. Again, that's been confirmed by a lot of friends that I have, who live quite far away from me maybe, and I'm not able to meet them in person. They say, because they have some kind of idea that they need to hustle and grind to make a living as a Gen Z person, that you just don't have time to rekindle a lot of older friendships or go and meet people in the real world. And this kind of side hustle mentality is really isolating a lot of people, and I think social media definitely feeds into that, the amount of time we spend on devices. Social media will also exacerbate what I like to call the comparison effect that a lot of Gen Z feel. We will go on social media, and a lot of the time we will follow people from Gen Z who are doing, on the face of it, a lot better than us economically. Be it streamers, wannabe entrepreneurs, people who make YouTube videos. Not me, I'm poor. For example, we will see these people, they're doing, again, on the face of it, a lot better than us, and when we turn off their videos, when we stop watching their streams, we are back in reality, and we're like, oh, my life sucks. My life sucks compared to that guy. How did he make it and I didn't? So there is that kind of effect going on, again, either consciously or not. I would liken this use of social media, which I think a lot of people in Gen Z do, as being kind of like being inside in a zoo. Except you're not the person at the zoo looking at the animals. You're the animals in the cage. And you're looking out at all the free people on the inside. That's the influencers that you follow. and you're looking at them, they look free, they look happy, and you're stuck inside in that cage. And again, for a lot of the doomers in our generation, that's what causes it. They'll see a hyperactive streamer screaming, throwing their arms about like an IShowSpeed or a Kai Cenat, or they will see some kind of so-called entrepreneur like an Iman Gadzhi, and they'll say, man, these people have so much money, and you know, I know that I could follow them, that I could more or less do a similar thing, but the algorithm won't pick me up. Or, you know, it could be the other way where they say, man, I tried so hard all my life, I followed all the right paths, I went to uni, I worked hard in all of my classes, and yet I have nothing to show for it. And these people, through sheer luck of the algorithm, managed to get out. And that's really hurting our generation too. So I've been teasing you for this entire video, saying that I'm going to tell you why I'm not a doomer myself. So here we go. I think the first thing, and I'm going to go back to the same argument that I used right at the beginning of this video, and I'm going to say that we need to put our generation in historical context. I think a lot of us are very, very doomerish about potential crises that are going to happen in the future. Now, I think a lot of that doom is warranted. I think that these crises are coming. There's not a lot of power or agency that we have to deal with them. All we kind of have is our attitude towards that problem. That's why I'm making this video. But if you put us in our historical context, yes, the crisis that we deal with in the future might be very, very bad. But I very much doubt they're going to be as bad as what 20-something-year-olds would have had to deal with in World War I or in the gulags in Soviet Russia. I remember when I was 20, I went to Belgium to visit the graves of the fallen soldiers of World War I. And this had a lasting effect on me for the following reason. The very first grave that I encountered there was of a young Irish soldier who was 2 years younger than I was then. And a note was left by his graveside. And it said, "Dear James, thank you for bravely sacrificing your future so that we may be allowed to have a better one." And that stuck with me since that day. I have to remind myself day by day that no matter how down I feel about the future that I kind of inherited, that what James went through was a lot worse. And he sacrificed that for me. He didn't sacrifice that for me to get all down in the dumps and depressed about my situation. He sacrificed that so that I could have this life, grab it, and squeeze the juice out of it no matter what. No matter what the circumstances were going to be, because he didn't know. So, I think first of all, it's not to take our historical position for granted. Sure, things may not be good for you right now. You might live in worse circumstances than me. But things have got pretty bad for a lot of people in the past. And I think it shows that human beings, no matter what circumstances we are in, are extremely resilient people. We can make it. And it's something I wholeheartedly believe. So the next point I want to make here to show why I'm not particularly a doomer is that your government is probably killing Santa Claus. Now, I know that might seem like a ridiculous way to start this point, but I promised entertainment, so here we are. I think you can make these points and still have a little bit of fun. My 3 siblings are all considerably younger than me. They're still Gen Z, but they're all considerably younger than me. One of the greatest joys I had as a young person was not going down the stairs on Christmas morning and getting my own presents. It was when I, let's say, came of age, where I understood a little bit more about the world, and I saw the innocent joy on their faces as children to receive their gifts from Santa Claus. And I thought, even as a young guy, I thought, it's going to be magical one day, when I'm old enough and I have my own children, to witness that magic again in them. Now, I say that the governments are killing Santa Claus because people like me and people like you, we're being denied, there is a sense that we are being denied the economic opportunities to have that very experience. Now, it might not be that one. It may be some other kind of romantic experience that you've thought about in your head that actually you do have an entitlement to. And people are scared of that word. They're scared of that word entitlement. Now, again, I think responsibility is a very, very important thing. And I think in life, nobody is owed anything. But if your parents' generation were able to do these kind of romantic things like get married, move in together at a young age, to start their own family, to experience Christmas Day, to have the magic of Santa Claus in their house, it's not a big ask for you to want to experience the same. And I'm sick of people pretending that it is. The governments are killing Santa Claus, and this is why I'm not a doomer. I can't be a doomer. I can't lie down and let them kill him. I have to fight against it. I have to say something. This is not okay. I think the doomer mindset, although it is justified based on a lot of rational factors that I outlined previously, it is very passive. Like, what are you going to do if you're a doomer? Are you going to lie flat like Gen Z are doing in China? Are you going to become a hikikomori like the Japanese Gen Z are doing? Or are you going to stand up? Are you going to voice your concerns? Are you going to actually say something? Are you actually going to do something about it? Are you going to fight for your future? Futile and all as that fight might be. We can do something here. That's why I've had this behind me the entire time I've been recording. The counter press. I think, and I've said this in my previous video, a lot of you agreed with me, and I hope you still do. I hope you're still on the train. That if we put our concerns together, if we kind of unify them, again, I'm willing to push these concerns through myself. This is not necessarily my channel for my opinions. I'm willing to get feedback and alter what I believe our generation thinks. I think if we get these concerns in one place, put them together and build up enough of an audience, that people will start to take notice. They will say, oh, Gen Z are actually thinking this, and it's reasonable. We're able to actually articulate these things. I think it's very, very important. My attitude is to look at the despair, to look at the crises that are coming, to look into that dark abyss and smile. Look at it, say, bring it on. I know there's trouble coming. Life is trouble, death is not. Bring it on. I want to see if I can handle it. And I hope that fires you up too. Because I know when you don't get this kind of perspective articulated to you. It's always, oh man, there are so many problems for our generation. How the hell are we going to cope with it? That's not what this channel is about. This channel is about fighting against, pressing back against that nihilistic vision of the future that we have been fed. And trying to do something about it. Not just giving up hope forever. That's what I want this show to be. I want it to be a counter press against that future. And the press is for the people who want to fight. I'm going to use my life as an example of how we can fight against this. We don't have to become successful monetarily to do this. People are not defined by their monetary value alone. There is more to you. There is spirit. There is physicality. There is your attitude towards your life. I think if there's enough of us, we can make a counter society across multiple countries. We need to put ourselves into positions of influence, whether that is in our careers or in politics, to make a difference, to voice these concerns in an articulate and passionate manner. And if you're with me on that, then please, please stick around. There will be more.